Hey guys, and welcome back to the Windsor Time podcast. I'm your host. As always, I am joined by Ben. And then we have another guest today. We have my buddy, Andy. How's it going, man?
It's good. I'm happy to be here. It's kind of cool to be sitting in between two watch connoisseurs here locally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like I don't deserve to be sitting here right now.
I think you're giving us a little more credit.
That was a lot of credit.
I don't even know how to spell connoisseur, so, you know.
I think it starts with a K. No, it's funny. I called you literally an hour ago, and I was like, hey, man, we need a guest for today. Is there any way you're available? And you came through. So thank you for being here.
That's what I'm due. I'm the guy that comes through.
Absolutely, man. So we like to talk about watches. But before we get into that, I think we need to do a little bit of cheers. So I believe you have a Blanton's, and we both have some Redbreast. Always good. So cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Guys. Thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks
Absolutely.
for the bourbon.
Yeah, for sure. So
Our pleasure.
we got in contact with one another. I think it was through Instagram, talking about watches. Was that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe now?
Almost 3 years ago now.
Yeah. And then I want to say, was it a year or two ago, we came into Windsor together.
Yeah, and we did our
and we did a
filming. That was
video.
fun.
Andy has a phenomenal series breaking down all the real estate things in Charlotte. I guess we should say that. You're a real estate agent.
That is what I do.
So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to dig into there. But yeah, we started talking watches, and I remember I would get, and I still do, so many messages of people saying, hey, what watch should I buy?
Mm-hmm.
And I love the question. It's phenomenal, but I don't know. And I remember you were like, oh, should I get a Daytona? Should I get this? And I was like, yeah, dude, get a Daytona, whatever. And then lo and behold, you messaged me and you were like, here's the Daytona I got. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this guy's for real.
Yeah, here it is.
And then I went to your thing and you had all your awesome videos. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like a real person.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked.
So is that literally, that's how you guys met, was via watch question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was between a two-tone Yachtmaster. I like two-tone because I have a gold ring, so I always think I like two-tone. I like having some gold.
Together a little bit.
Yeah. And so I was between, I really wanted this, like, it was like a silver face Yachtmaster that was a two-tone. Mm-hmm. And then I started talking to Noah. I'm like, hey, look, I also noticed that for like another $5,000, there's this two-tone Daytona. Yeah. And he was like, dude, if you're going to spend that for the Yachtmaster, like spend a little more for the Daytona.
Totally.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's what I ended up doing. And I think the first time we met was after I had gotten it. We went to go to ... and got some drinks and
love ...
and talked to all things watches and whiskey pretty much. So
Cool. I think we were there for like 3 hours because I was like, oh, like, again, it's so interesting. I feel like with social media, you meet these people online and you develop a relationship, almost like the show Catfish sometimes. And then they end up being like legit cool people.
It kind of goes back, this could go off on a tangent pretty quickly, but it kind of goes back to what used to happen and function, you know, at the beginning of Carolina Watch Club, because, and still happens a little bit. A lot of people in our group literally know each other via handles and have no idea what the person looks like, what their name is, etc. And I remember, I think we touched on it in an earlier episode, but our kind of breakthrough event was at a brewery, and we specifically had a setup where you had a name tag and you put your Instagram handle on it and your real name, and everyone, I mean, it was like lightning struck and everyone got to know everyone very quickly. And it was so funny how people had multi-year long digital relationships in a Catfish-esque style and had no idea what the other person looked like.
Yeah.
It's funny now if someone were to ask, if I were to interview you and say, hey, how did the Carolina Watch Group, like, when did that take off? What was like the inflection point? You're like, well, when we told people to put Instagram handles on their name tags.
Yeah. That was one of the points for sure.
Absolutely. So the Daytona was how we got to know each other.
Yeah.
I know before that you had other watches. Let's just take it all the way back. Did you have like a watch as a child that kind of got you interested in it? Like, where did this all start?
So my grandfather always collected watches. He never really collected anything like crazy. He wasn't like a huge luxury watch collector by any means, but he loved collecting sweaters, shoes, and watches. Mm-hmm. And so after he passed, I was like, okay, I need to get like a nice watch. Like, it's time to go spend more than $150 on a watch. You know, I don't need to be wearing a fake Daytona or a fake Royal Oak anymore. Or a $10 watch from Instagram with a red, white, and blue strap that doesn't actually work. Mm-hmm. So I went from like 30 watches that are all really cheap I actually went into Windsor and went to look at the pre-owned options and ended up with the Seiko Presage, the old fashioned.
Sweet.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a dark brown. It's got like a couple different tones of brown on the face, on the dial. And I fell in love with it. And so that was where I got my first luxury watch. This was in probably the middle of 2019. And so then from there, I was kind of hooked. And after that, ended up buying an Omega Speedmaster. So I went with a Speedy next. I went another white face, two-tone. Yeah. I love the look. And I wore that for a couple years and then found myself getting an orange and black Oris. Oh man, I'm trying to think.
What's it, the Aqua Timer or something?
It's the.
What's their diver?
It's not Aqua Timer.
It's whatever the diver is.
Yeah, I should know.
Yeah.
So, but it's like orange and black. I wanted like the sport watch. As a Virginia Tech fan, I was like, this is cool. I can wear this for that. And then from there, ended up with basically when I got into real estate sales, I was like, okay, my goal is to sell $1 million house. And when I do that, I'm going to get myself a Rolex and reward myself. And so then in the end of 2020, I was able to represent a buyer and purchase a $1.1 million house, and we were off to the races.
That's awesome.
And so then I was really looking for something. I didn't know what I wanted. I know that I had a specific budget, and the Daytona was over the budget. But after talking to Noah and a couple other people, it was like, okay, if I'm going to spend this much money to go get a Yachtmaster, I might as well just spend that much and get a Daytona. And that was absolutely the best advice I could have gotten because I can't take this thing off my wrist.
Yeah, it's a very iconic watch that, like you said, it even, being steel and gold, or they call it two-tone, it does so much.
Well, and the thing is, as a realtor in a city like Charlotte, we're not a flashy city. Charlotte's not a very flashy city. So there are certain watches that do really well here and certain ones that certainly don't.
Sure.
And especially in an industry where I'm in front of hundreds of people, sometimes every day.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted, and Noah and I talked about this a lot, was I wanted something that the right people would know exactly what it is, but you're not sending the wrong signal to the wrong people.
Totally. We have that conversation. I deal with a lot of people that maybe they're, and they do very well for themselves, but they're in car sales or they're in, I'm not equating that to your industry whatsoever, but they're in a sales position where their clients are extremely well to do, but they themselves are doing well as well. And they want to represent that. But there's that line between like, hey, I'm successful and hey, I'm making too much money where, maybe I'm getting the better end of the deal. And you want to be respectable, but like you said, the right people understand it and respect it, but you're not over the top for people that, otherwise see it a different way.
Yeah.
I think that's something, and it's so funny, real estate, the jewelry business, and then corporate. In the corporate world, it's the same thing as well, where you have this balance of like, don't one up your CEO or your boss, but like enjoy it. And that's where, all the pieces that I've gotten have been somewhat, wearing the Pepsi today, so that's not really under the radar, but everything else has been like...
It still falls into that like respectable category where it's not like, it has enough, to it, but it's not over the top, it's...
Well, and I definitely wouldn't, and I love them, but like a gold date is like probably not the move to show up to, like do a meeting. Unless you're like a Josh Altman or like
what's a lot. We talked about that in our episode with Nate Cho too. He was talking about that's one of the beauties of micro brands or independence, because you can have a badass independent watch that the watch community is just nuts about, but you can also be in front of your boss or a CEO and it does not want the guy wearing the gold presidential, in their boardroom.
So the message is, if you want to hide money, buy a De Bethune or buy something that nobody outside of us knows what it is. But it is very cool. So you touched on it a little bit. As somebody in the real estate game, you love watches. You found a good balance. Do you notice, and do you ever talk with other real estate agents maybe about their watches? Is that a common thing that when you hit certain goals, you go ahead and you buy X watch, or is it just different for different people?
Every realtor kind of does it differently, how they reward themselves and treat themselves. I think, like, I'm a big fan. I actually posted a video recently about this, where if you hit big milestones or you have big wins, it's good to celebrate it, but you also don't want to go crazy. Like, you don't want to go buy a $100,000 Royal Oak, right? if you're selling $1 million house and you get a $30,000 check, that doesn't make much sense. But like, you also don't want to just go on vacation and leave for a while and take off work and things like that. So this was a good way to kind of reward myself, remind myself that I do work very hard for this and enjoy it at the same time. Yeah. So a lot of realtors do stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's not like just a one-time thing, to your point. It's not like you went on vacation and obviously you have the memory, but I mean, that's something where every time you look at it, you're going to remember that breakthrough where you started to become more, at a certain level of success and kind of keep driving you, if anything, Yeah,
we're still sitting here 3 years later and I just told a story about my first $1 million sale.
Exactly.
That's the whole point.
Now you get those every week probably. So no worries.
I try.
I don't know, man. I mean, in the world of watches, where do you see your collection going next? What's that next piece? Because I know we've talked a little bit, when you hit that $2 million sale or the $3 million sale, in the world of watches specifically, what's that next thing that's on your radar?
It's funny because we were actually just talking about this pretty recently because I have a house that's over $2 million under contract right now. So that's the next milestone, right? That's the next timepiece kind of milestone. And so I'm struggling though to find what I want to get because to take the words out of Noah's mouth, there's nothing that gets my adrenaline pumping like the Daytona does.
Yeah.
Within a certain budget.
A $1 million house, you got a steel and gold Daytona. $2 million house, maybe a gold Daytona.
There you go. Right. But you do have to, and that's an interesting thing in this hobby. It kind of has to be a little uncomfortable to really get that full rush of whatever it is you're purchasing. And I mean, you should never spend outside your means, but maybe a little bit.
Disclaimers.
So what would you...
Not financial advisors.
Not financial
we are
advice
not
at
advisors.
all.
Certainly not that.
What would you say to somebody? So like he has the Daytona. What's the next piece after a Daytona? That's like under 30.
Well, first of all, like I'm in that mental space right now where, at least as we are filming this, I should say, once again, disclaimer, depending on when this launches, but we are moments away from Watches and Wonders releases. So it's one of those tempting things to speculate on what's coming. But I would say the most important thing is looking at your collection. And I know it sounds like you said you wear that Daytona all day long, all the time, but are there any other pieces you are trickling in and wearing? And is there, are you going to want to watch that maybe does wear for special occasions more than a steel and gold watch, like something where you go out to a gala or something and you have that like, man, I may only wear this 6 or 7 times a year, but when I wear it, it's just so freaking awesome.
You are somebody that dresses up a lot.
That is also something we've talked about because the most recent watch that I purchased is a Tag.
Yeah,
which
the same one we have.
I never.
I
never thought I would be a Tag guy. I just was like, I'm not going to get a Tag.
That watch just hits differently. I feel like, and like not to sound like cliche, but it just totally does.
Well, and they're new, the solar one they came out with.
Yeah, super cool.
It's like
same wheelhouse a little bit, but
I just remember vividly because I was looking for something like that where it's like a special occasion watch. I do dress up a lot, so like a nice black and gold watch that's like nice and dressy would be a good addition to the collection without having to go 40 grand for another day, daily that's nice, right?
What are the golds and Daytonas at? Are those like low 30s?
I would say they're kicking. I mean, everything's come down a little bit from the madness of a year or two ago. I would say they're kicking around in the mid 30s to up to 40, depending on the condition and box papers and everything. And probably some in the high 20s, low 30s, depending on condition. But yeah, like an older Zenith movement Daytona in gold, that'd be a great piece that, it's not as there are some out there. You're at that point being a discontinued watch, you're only gonna be getting it at secondary market. So you don't really have to worry about buying it at retail versus secondary and all of this. It's a watch that's just timeless. But it really just, to me, it comes down to whether you do want to diversify away from Daytona or not, because a gold Daytona would, be a different watch in a way, but it's still, at the end of the day, unless it's Zenith movement, it's going to be the same, a little bit of a lateral in terms of how it wears,
And that'll be the interesting thing. That's something I'm like battling with right now. Like, do I want to be the guy that has like a bunch of Daytonas? Which there's nothing wrong with that.
That's not a bad place to be. I mean,
certainly a first world problem.
It'll be interesting to see. You touched on it. We're filming this directly before all the new releases. What do you guys think? So for the two-tone models, they've had the precious metal bezel. Could it go ceramic? I think that's an interesting thing.
That's the big question.
Yeah, and if it did, that would be cool for
the
you.
Precious metal, solid precious metal, and steel and gold precious metal. Are they both going to go ceramic? Is one going to go ceramic, or neither going to go ceramic?
Yeah.
Is something going to happen no one's thinking about?
Right.
Hard to say.
From a historical precedent, there's never been another Rolex model that has a ceramic bezel and also this other version that has a steel.
The 6263 and 6265 Daytonas were not ceramic bezels, but there were, they went to a black bezel on, I want to say 6263, and then went away from that again back to stainless bezels. So like there's been these eras of changing the bezel to that, dark look, but in terms of going ceramic, Rolex is always pushing the envelope. And I think if they feel that a technology is better or something's going to wear better, if it's going to scratch less, et cetera, that's what they're going to try to implement over time. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them do that. Yeah. But it doesn't mean they do it just to do it. I mean, they'll have a reason to do anything. It doesn't mean they'll, do it now though. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot of what ifs for the next couple of weeks. So
I'll tell you, to kind of backtrack a little to the original question though. The two brands that I've been kind of intrigued by for the next step would be a Patek or AP.
Yeah, AP came up 2 or 3 times right at the beginning of the conversation, so I was gonna jokingly say it sounds like AP might be on your mind, but
the ultimate dream watch is a gold Royal Oak.
Yeah,
that is the ultimate goal, is to get one of those and just rock that every day, all day.
In my opinion, then if that's like. I can imagine you have a gold Daytona, not to bring gold Daytona back up, and you're still thinking about that watch down the road. So I would say, maybe you diversify away from Daytona for now, and then hone in on something like that for that grail piece. We always talk about grails on here, but
that's it.
It's the North Star, definitely. So you're wearing a Daytona Chronograph. I mentioned earlier I'm wearing a Pepsi. Ben, we haven't really gotten to you. What do you have on today?
So Andy was just a minute ago mentioning Patek Philippe. So I am wearing a Patek Philippe 5170G chronograph with pultrometric scale, and G, of course, meaning white gold, and just awesome manually wound chronograph that to me is a little bit of a sleeper. Like I've got it on. It's probably not going to show up here, but it's a very dark blue, almost super dark navy blue.
It almost
strap.
Yeah, I thought it was black.
Yeah, it's kind of dynamic, but it definitely leans black. But a little dressier watch, but I try to wear it as casually as I can because I just have fun with it. But it's just an awesome watch. That the movement side, I'll take it off. But the movement side is just killer. And
that's beautiful.
This was the predecessor to this. Not to go down the Patek rabbit hole, but the predecessor to this. Was the 5070, and that was a non-in-house, recalibrated movement. That's kind of a, historical piece and very collectible piece. And then this was Patek Philippe's, I believe, their first, not this exact colorway and setup, but this movement was one of their first in-house fully integrated chronograph movements. So it's just kind of like a chronograph from the ground up. It's not like a kit where they add the chronograph onto an existing base. It's like pure chronograph, which is just awesome.
Is there anything cooler than a Patek with scratches on it?
Oh yeah, I wear the heck out of it.
I was gonna say, was this something last year or something?
I got that, about 2 years ago, yeah. So at that time, it had already been discontinued. So I actually did buy this as a previously enjoyed watch. But I think it was a watch. I don't mean to just go to something's value, but it's a watch that I bought it right in the heat of everyone paying attention to steel sports models and things like this, which I think are just as timeless as they come.
Absolutely.
Things like this were really, just the market was not quite there for them compared to their MSRP. And now it's all come back up because I think people are diversifying away from steel a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's just been an awesome watch. And I try to wear the heck out of it because, it's made to be worn, as we've said on here before. So yeah.
While we're talking about white gold, why don't we jump into some of our shop picks for this week?
Yeah.
You have something else in white gold.
I have something else in white gold. So this is from Windsor. Specifically, this is in stock right now. And this is a really, really cool, also now discontinued, white gold Rolex Sky-Dweller. So this is Sky-Dweller with leather strap and white gold deployment buckle. And it's one of the earlier iterations of how the Sky-Dweller launched. And then when steel Sky-Dweller with the white gold fluted bezel came out, they kind of initially, I want to say right off the bat, actually, they discontinued the white gold version. So it's been discontinued for a few years now. And yeah, for a Rolex, it's one of the larger models they make. But it's funny, I had it beside I think a 44 millimeter Breitling today, and I felt like this looked tiny compared to that still. So it's all about perspective. But for Rolex, Rolex sticks around that 40 millimeter for so many watches, 40 or 41, and then all of a sudden when you go up a couple millimeters, it does feel big, and it's solid white gold, so it has some heft to it.
Definitely. When the Sky-Dweller came out, and you kind of mentioned it briefly, it was just a precious metal watch, because I feel like I remember there was, again, in the community, a little bit of an outcry when stainless came out, because the guys who had ponied up for white gold.
Right, and I think, if you're looking at the aesthetic of it, it looks very similar, but at the same time, they did have strap options on the white gold that they don't offer on stainless, at least not currently. So it did separate it a little bit. But yeah, there was a little bit of aesthetically it looks similar, but it's a lot less money. However, the dials are unique. I mean, they don't do this color dial. It's almost this like charcoal slate dial.
It's a really cool
beautiful. And
very,
then
very
the sub dial, the second time zone dial being so like a little offset and everything. They do look different in precious metal than stainless, but just an awesome watch. And that fluted bezel, the fact that it actually has this, locking system to it functions as the, instead of having crown notches, you've got the bezel for all
there's 3 different
it's 3 in a neutral, basically. It's such a cool movement, and one that I think, once again, compared to a stainless watch, this watch in precious metals, probably undervalued in a way, but just such a cool dial, especially with that white second time zone ring.
Well, I just like that it's different.
Yeah,
it's so different.
People see this in the bezel and everything, and it's like, you think of, for me as someone who's newer to the watch world, you think of like the date just and the date dates, and it's just like, you look at it and you're like, that's not what that is at all.
Yeah, it is interesting you say that, because Rolex, I can't really speak to 100% for them, but when it came out, this was positioned more like a date just, or it's like an evolution of that world versus a sports model, but it definitely walks the line between the two, but it's not necessarily like a traditional professional model either. So I think sometimes people conflate like the steel Sky-Dweller with other steel models, but it's really kind of in that traveler's dress casual world,
Well, and I don't think it gets enough credit, because in the market, at least, I would say, generally speaking, they're undervalued for what they are. As complicated as it is,
I would say, and I just making up numbers here, but I would say something like 90% of people that look at the Sky-Dweller don't realize that this thing's essentially an annual calendar with a second time zone that has all these functionalities that's patented and so unique to Rolex. Most people just look at, it has a ring and it has a fluted bezel and it's bigger, and that's what I want, and people want it, so I want it. But when you actually look at the technology behind this watch, it's second to none. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we talked about the Sky-Dweller. Yeah. What did you bring today?
So today I brought, and I'm horrible with reference numbers, but a Panerai Submersible reference.
I believe it is the 1223 in 42 millimeters.
It is.
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah, with the white dial. Really phenomenal watch. You had lent me one of those, I want to say 2 or 3 summers ago. And I took it down to the beach. And I mean, the accordion style strap is just such a comfortable thing on the wrist. All their straps are great for sure, but this one's a particular favorite. And then you get so much functionality out of this watch.
Totally.
So I'm a big Panerai fan in general. I've had them in the past before, but with the new Luminor, at least for the base model, I think it went from 100 meters water or 300 meters water resistance to 100 meters. So, now with this watch, you get a little bit better water resistance than other ones. So, that's something that's really fantastic. I love, and we'll try to get a phenomenal click. And I mean, in practical day-to-day use, if you're timing pasta or pizza or something like that, you can just click it right over and time whatever you're doing. But really cool, 42 millimeter, a little bit more wearable. The 40, I think this is 42, and then it goes up to 45,
44, 45.
Yeah.
There's now a mid-size.
Okay.
There was only 42 and 47, and it was a big, to me, it's a
Huge
big discrepancy. And there's, for a lot of guys, I never think that's small on anyone, but when they think of Panerai, they want that, they want to be Sylvester Stallone wearing 47 millimeter bronzo, who wouldn't want to be?
Yeah.
But there's a big jump from 42 to 47. And then most guys, if they found that a little small, a lot of guys can't wear the 47, or we touched on this with the big pile before, they can wear the 47 or 46.
Yeah.
But they don't feel like they can. So now there's a middle ground between the two too, which has been a great seller to talk business. But
I just like it because it feels like super utilitarian.
Totally, definitely
like
a tool.
the look,
and it's got this like steampunk-esque like Jules Verne bezel that's very nautical, which obviously fits the watch, and just super cool piece. And the original launch piece of this with the black dial, at first I think they did 500 or 1,000 of them. They actually had a sapphire crystal case back, which was a first for I think a Panerai Submersible, or there haven't been many. They quickly discontinued that, went to the solid case back. I don't think it changed the water resistance, but that might be a little sleeper out there that's kind of pretty collectible. It was the first run of this in 42, had a sapphire crystal, and then they quickly went away. So
I think you had lent me a black dial, but I don't remember having a sapphire.
Yeah, like literally, I think we saw one of them was sapphire, and then it all went to stainless. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit, I think.
Total like tangent.
Yeah, we love
when it comes to sleepers and interesting collectibles. And since we're drinking bourbon, I was like,
the Whoop band? No.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, these Whoop bands, super collectible.
I know.
They tell me how good I sleep.
That's what it made me think. It's like sleeper. All right. Sorry, totally interrupted you.
The big thing now in the bourbon world, us drinking bourbon and some of this Irish whiskey reminded me of that too, is people, instead of collecting specific like letters of Blanton's or numbers for blade and bow, they're collecting the actual date that it was barreled. So you can actually, or bottled, I mean. Yeah. So you can actually try and find specific like date bottles if there's a date that lines up when a kid is born or when you get married or things like that. People start hunting instead of for like the A in Bland's. They're looking for a specific date.
March 21st of 2005.
Yeah.
Was it Waco or Ben Clymer? Where it's like super deep, and it's just like you keep going like in whatever hobby, like deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
It's like if you look for that one specific Panerai, it's like that's like going to look for a specific date of a Bland's bottle.
Yeah, there's always got to be a deeper path to go down,
Absolutely. Well, we've talked about a lot. Where can people find you online, on Instagram? Plug everything you want to plug.
Well, Instagram is definitely one of the big ones. It's AndyG_realtor. If you Google Andy Griesinger, which is tough to spell, but if you Google Andy G Realtor in Charlotte, my SEO guy will be thrilled because it's all going to pop up right at the top of the Google sheet. So it will be up there. I've got a YouTube channel. If you want it, it'd be great to rewatch our video, and maybe we'll have to refilm that since.
Yeah, we'll put a link below to the video we did.
We were masked up in that video, so
I know,
it'd be nice to do that without masks.
What a Wild West time,
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks for being here, Andy.
Awesome.
It was a pleasure.
Cool deal. Well, thank you guys as always for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.